My name is Xavier Medina. I'm the writer-director of a feature narrative called Sunnyland.
So, this will not surprise you. I have a lot of questions about casting and directing children and finding the perfect child actor. But I first want to just tackle the story. This is a story set in a place where the place is as much a character as the characters, right? Miami is a character in the story.
It is.
And you have this seemingly counterintuitive, but if you know circumstances there, maybe not, of a child in Miami having never seen the ocean.
Yeah.
How did that story come to you, get to the page, and then in front of a camera?
It's an interesting one. I'm a bit of a synesthetic, hasn't been confirmed, but I tend to see what I hear.
Right.
Me and my wife were sitting down at the last Q&A for the grant that we got for the film. And while we were waiting for the Q&A to start, they played a song by Animal Collective, and I saw the narrative and the visual. It just it ran through my mind really quickly. So yeah, I just went home and started writing after that. It's a crazy process because you have to be able to adapt with children. You can't be too strict with what you have on the page. You have to be really flexible. But yeah, that's kind of how it started. It started with a song that had nothing to do with it. The interesting thing though is I have a few friends that are teachers in different public schools in Puerto Rico and in Miami.
Okay.
And when I told them about their story, they're like, I have a bunch of students that they've never been to the beach.
Right.
And I was like, oh, so this isn't like a far-fetched idea. And they were like, not at all. It's more common than you would think. So I came up with the idea and then found out it was really plausible. It's just something that happens for different sets of circumstances. Some of these kids are taking care of little brothers and sisters.
Right.
And in Puerto Rico, sometimes they don't have transportation and they live in the mountains.
Right.
But for whatever reason, we have a lot of examples of people that live relatively close to the ocean and they've never been.
And so the character of the mother has her own relationship with water,
right,
and her reasons too, her own personal reasons.
Right.
How was that familiar to you? Knowing people, I mean, assuming growing up in Puerto Rico, again, the landscape is a big part of who you are.
It is.
Were there? Did you know people like her who had that relationship with water? That
I did, yeah. Okay. And everyone reacts differently to different experiences, but most of the stories that I had heard were for Cubans in Puerto Rico or Cubans in Miami having left Cuba on rafts.
Right.
And some of them saw terrible things,
right.
Sharks and all sorts of negative emotions that are associated with the water after having made that voyage. And some of them are like, I won't touch the water. It's beautiful. I'll go to the beach. I'll look at it, but I won't get in the water.
Right.
And one of the people that I was talking to, he's the father of a friend. He lives in front of the beach.
Right.
He loves the ocean, but he gets panicked. He won't touch it. So that's where the inspiration for the mom came from. A lot of these people that they just can't do it at this point, and by extension, they don't want their family members to put themselves in danger.
And that's how she is with her daughter.
Yeah.
So tell me about the casting process of casting a child who's going to be the heart of this story, and she captures your heart the first time you hear her speak, the first time you see her on screen. But that's not a given. You have to find that person. So tell me about that process.
Isabela, the main actress, she's an amazing little girl. It's funny because we did I think more than one casting session, and we saw a lot of talented kids. We were in conversations with casting directors in Miami, and they brought some of their most talented students, and none of it was really working. And then actually I had started working, we shot for a week with a boy that it was originally a boy, not a girl. And he was amazing when we're doing scenes we had rehearsed. But as soon as weather changed or something happened where we needed to switch gears and improvise, he would just fall out of character.
Right.
So I had to stop production, and I was like, I need to rewrite this in 2 weeks, and find another person. And by that point, my wife had read the script, and she was like, I know this little girl, she exists. Her name is Isabela, and she was the neighbor of one of her friends. So I was like, yeah, I'd love to meet her. And she steals the show.
Yeah.
Like, she walks into a room, and it's her world. And it's funny because Isabela was 5 years old when we shot the film. She was still learning how to read. And so her mom would read her the script, and she would memorize lines just from listening, hearing it.
That's amazing. Well, I was going to ask you about, obstacles that might have come up during this, and you've already answered that. And she, one of the, this is a story about inequality, and it's a story about place and climate, but it's the interior world of her.
Yeah.
And that's what's so special, or one of the many special things about it. You had mentioned, the directing a child is very different than working with adults, right down to the process of how she learns lines.
Yeah.
How did that change your approach as a filmmaker?
It was a very organic process. I tried not to come in with like preconceived ideas on how it was going to work. I had worked with children before, but it was commercials.
Right.
And it's a completely different animal. When you're doing a feature, it's easier to keep a child's attention for a day.
Right.
Doing that for 31 afternoons is a
Right.
different ball game. And the whole process was very unorthodox because we couldn't afford a tutor, so we couldn't get them out of school.
Right.
So we were picking them up at school at 3 and shooting until like 7.
Wow.
I needed to, the casting was so important because I needed them to be very similar to their characters. They couldn't really be acting.
Right.
It wouldn't work that way.
At that age, it just needs to be genuine.
And within the budget constraints that we had, we needed to be super flexible. So Isabela is very much like her character, and then Natalia, she was 10 years old. She had done a feature before that and a few commercials, and she's very emotionally mature for her age. She's very talented actress as well. And another thing that was very important to me was I did a lot of like play dates with them, and just I had them hang out with each other for weeks before we started shooting, so that they were actually friends when the movie started.
That's great.
So everything was very different than what I've done in commercials or short films before. And you have a lot of constraints with budgets, but having a little money also gives you a lot of freedom in terms of how creative you can get with your process. So it was everything that I did for this film I've never done really before in other projects.
Tell me about shooting in Miami. We talked a little bit off camera just about the color. And again, Miami is very much a character in this film. And you've harnessed the feeling and the emotion of the place.
Thank you.
Talk about how it's one thing, I guess, to see it, and it's another thing to capture it and then to give it to someone else. So how did that process work?
I think a lot of it came from location scouting. I just rode my bike all through the city, and then I had seen Sunnyland. The actual name of the trailer park was Sunnyland. They later changed it, but I just rode my bike through it, and that's how it is. Those are the colors. Okay. Those are the real people that live there. So it was hard not to feel inspired when you walked around that neighborhood. And it was interesting because the process, again, was very organic. We kind of like became friends with some people in the community before we even seriously considered shooting there. But by the time the movie started, it felt very personal to us, very familiar. And it wasn't, at that point, it wasn't hard to point the camera in the right direction and get the colors and the angles and the lighting.
Because it was there.
Because it was there,
So you've had a lot of experience, been very successful as a creative, as a storyteller, but in in different genres. Now that you've had this experience with a feature film, where are your interests now?
I'm writing 2 other features right now. I mean, veering off of my regular path at this point. I want to try some genre stuff.
Okay.
Maybe, I'm writing a vengeance thriller and
Nice.
a crime drama.
Okay.
So visual style will probably be very similar, but just, I guess a little more visceral in terms of how graphic it could get.
Okay. In the writing process for you, are you one who, you just live with the story, you get it down, you revise, and then you move on to shooting, or are you always kind of tinkering with it as a writer director? Are you always tinkering with it?
I'm always I'm always tinkering with it, not on purpose. I'm just open to it.
Okay.
I get a lot of inspiration from my actors as well.
Right.
My wife and other creatives on set. So I have I'm very strict about tone and mood and what the viewer, in theory, should feel when watching a certain scene or sequence.
Right.
But how we get to that feeling, it's not really important
flexible.
to me. We can be flexible with that.
What has the reaction been, especially for those who know Miami? What is the reaction been?
It's been beautiful. We premiered at New York Latino Film Festival, and for whatever reason, there was someone in the crowd that grew up in Miami, and she was there, and the Q&A in the end, she was like, "You captured exactly how my childhood felt like in Miami," and I was. It's the most flattering thing I could hear.
I was going to say, that needs to be on every trailer, every promotional piece.
It just felt really, really good that I was able to do that. And a lot of what you see in the film is inspired by how my childhood felt.
Right.
Growing up in the 80s in Puerto Rico,
right.
We had incredible freedom.
Yep.
It's also beautiful to see that other communities felt the same freedom growing up, and that we have a lot in common in that sense.
I love it. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing it with us here in Vermont. One of the things that I've been saying to folks who have blessed us with both their films and their presence is, we're this little tiny community in Vermont. We don't get to go to the theater and see films like this, except for 4 times a year. So it's wonderful.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you. Thanks.